Which wide receivers will make the roster? Well, when I'm in Green Bay, Tom mother-loving Grossi. Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom, going to be wide receiver one, Grossi, and today we're going to be taking a look at the ultra-competitive wide receiver roster right now, and the crazy thing is, nobody knows how many wide receivers the Packers are going to wind up keeping, because you look at all the tight ends that we're going to most likely wind up keeping because of all their different skill sets and their ability to catch the ball. Or you can look at the fact that we brought in Randall Cobb, and oh boy, that means that someone is definitely going to get cut. And there's a number of guys who are right there on the bubble. There are some surprises for camp, and obviously we won't know any of these things until the end of August, but let's break it down, and I will give you my prediction as to which receivers I think will actually make the roster. Now, the first thing we need to figure out before we start talking about anybody is how many wide receivers are the Green Bay Packers going to keep? And if we go back a little bit, in 2019, they wound up keeping 6 receivers, and last year was only 5. And so trying to figure out how many they're going to keep, if I was a gambling man, I would say 6, maybe even potentially 7, just because so many of these guys offer a different skill set. If Randall Cobb wasn't brought in, I think it would have been capped out at 6, but at this point, it's kind of fair game. And what we can figure out easily is there is going to be at least 5 guys that are definitely going to make the roster. Devontae Adams, MVS, Amari Rodgers, Randall Cobb, and Allen Lazard. Those 5 are locks. There's not really any conversation about that. After that, that's when things start getting a little bit more tricky. You have guys like Malik Taylor, you have Equanimeous St. Brown, you have Devin Funchess, you have a guy like Juwann Winfree who is lighting it up in camp right now. So obviously we have some preseason games to go, so we'll see how these guys perform during those preseason games, which will definitely be a huge indicator on if they make the roster or not. But let's go through and I will give you my best predictions. So besides the 5 that are definitely going to make the roster, the other guys you have who are competing for those spots are Reggie Bagleton, the guy from the CFL who was cut last year but then re-signed. You also have Chris Blair. On top of that, you have Devin Funchess, Equanimeous St. Brown, Malik Taylor, DeAndre Tompkins, and Juwann Winfree. So you have 7 guys competing for either 1 or 2 spots if the Packers decide to keep 6 or 7 wide receivers. Now, if we're to cut this down a little bit further, Bagleton has looked good in training camp, but I would imagine he's going to be a practice squad guy. I think this is really going to come down to just a few guys, and those guys are going to be Devin Funchess, Equanimeous St. Brown, Malik Taylor, and Juwann Winfree. Now, you might be thinking, why Malik Taylor? Well, Malik Taylor offers something that these other guys don't. He's great on special teams. And considering that we are in dire need of guys on special teams, and that's usually how those fringe wide receivers make the roster, I kind of almost want to put a lock on Malik Taylor just because none of these other guys have that really to offer. You look at Devin Funchess, who's like, yeah, no, I don't want to play special teams. He offers a different skill set. Juwann Winfree, we haven't seen anything of him because he's just recently going into the Green Bay Packers and lighting it up in camp. And on top of that, you have Equanimeous St. Brown, who is not really a special teamer, but has been drafted by the Packers back in 2018 and has an issue staying on the field. So out of those 4 guys, if the Packers are going to keep 6 or 7 guys on the roster, Malik Taylor is almost a shoo-in to get in there unless he just bombs it during the preseason games and does not have a good camp. So then when it goes down to 3 guys, you have Juwann Winfree, Devin Funchess, and Equanimeous St. Brown if there's a 7th spot. Devin Funchess, the guy that we brought in last year, didn't play because he opted out due to COVID, is coming in now. Veteran wide receiver, offers that to a relatively young wide receiver room in terms of experience. So he definitely has something to offer. However, doesn't have the best completion rate. What he was playing with Cam Newton. I know a lot of people go back and forth. Was it Cam's fault or was it Devin Funchess' fault? Maybe it was both of their faults, but he definitely has some stuff to offer to the Packers. Then you have Equanimeous St. Brown, the guy who has been on the team the longest out of all of these guys and has a little bit of a rapport, at least with Aaron Rodgers. But again, the problem has been his consistency in that he hasn't been on the field too much. And when he has been, he runs some interesting routes and has made some clutch plays. But overall, I don't know if that's going to be enough to actually make the team. Juwann Winfree, we are going to need to see him play in these preseason games, which he will have ample opportunities to do so. But right now, he's just kind of like a flash in the pan in terms of what he's doing in camp. So there definitely needs to be more tape on Winfree before we make any decision. But I will say, just because you're looking good in camp doesn't really mean diddly squat. Bagleton looked pretty good last year. That went out the window. On top of that, you had like Darius Shepard, who was a rock star in camp. He wound up getting cut. You look at Jake Kumaro, who looked really good, and Aaron Rodgers really liked him. He got cut. Maybe the front office will actually have a conversation about this with Rodgers this time. So I'm not willing to give Winfree a spot yet. So if the Packers decide to keep 7 wide receivers, which I'm not convinced they're doing, because again, as I said, they have a pretty big tight end group, I think it's going to be a battle between Funchess and Equanimeous St. Brown. And quite honestly, considering the amount of time that Equanimeous St. Brown has had on this team, I'm going to give the edge to Devin Funchess. So if the Green Bay Packers keep 7 on the roster, the wide receiver room would look like this, in my opinion. Devontae Adams, MVS, Amari Rodgers, Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, Devin Funchess, and Malik Taylor. If they only keep 6, I can see them getting rid of Funchess, even though he took a pay cut, just because, again, he doesn't provide that special teams experience. But of course, we're still early in training camp. We have weeks to go. We need to see how these guys do in preseason, see the rapport that they have with Jordan Love and or Aaron Rodgers. So a lot can change between now and the end of August, but that's where I have it right now. I'm imagining they're going to keep 6, and I think Malik Taylor is going to be that guy who's going to wind up getting that last spot. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. You can always send me at TomGrossiComedy.com or at TomGrossiComedy, all social media, see down below. Check out podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, Spotify, and of course YouTube. And a big shout and thank you to all the patrons over at patreon.com/TomGrossiComedy and the YouTube members. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi. And as always, go Pack Go.